Hello everyone, Brandon here, and today we're going to take a look at a Paul Krugman article published on, when was this, the 8th, I think? Yeah, October 8th. Firstly, as far as I can tell, this article has nothing to do with economics, so not sure why you're writing about it, Paul, but just my general dislike for Paul Krugman, and this article is especially stupid, so let's just take a quick look at it. Many people are worried, rightly, about what the appointment of Brett Kavanaugh means for America in the long term. Translation: progressives and socialists are worried because Brett Kavanaugh will not do what they want. You see, they're used to something, and this has been a thing for quite a while, where the Supreme Court's actually more or less dominated by left-wing political people. This is how we have things that I will not make an argument for whether it's constitutional or not, but I've talked or listened to constitutional lawyers saying things like Roe v. Wade are really not the business of the Supreme Court. That should be left up to the state. But the judges on the Supreme Court took it upon themselves to make it their business and make rulings on it. So now the left, since they no longer own the Supreme Court, they're worried. They're worried that the Republicans are going to use the Supreme Court for the same thing. Now, if I were them, I'd be worried about the same thing. But whether they're going to do that or not, I don't really know. A lot of them will say things like constitutional law is important. It's a document that's meant to be interpreted, not. They say it's a living document, so like you can't just take what you want it to mean. It means what it means, and you have to interpret it that way, which isn't really what they were doing. So, I don't know. Then again, I don't really trust any politicians. Well, very few, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Republicans also try to abuse this power. But that is, as far as I can tell, why they're actually scared of this guy. He's a naked partisan who clearly lied under oath about many aspects of his personal history. I don't know what he lied about, but maybe? I don't know. There's no evidence here. Yeah, he's just kind of assuming you're going to believe him. Which, I mean, if you're someone who reads a lot of these articles and believes them all, and you just hear something like, he's a naked partisan who clearly lied under oath and about many aspects of his personal history, once you've heard that enough times, you just assume that it's fact, even though no one's actually substantiated the claim. Interesting. That's as important as, and related to, the question of what he did to Christine Blasey Ford. What he is alleged to have done. Paul, he is not proven to have done these things. And in fact, he brought evidence against the claims, which were themselves completely unsubstantiated and uncorroborated. So, as far as I'm concerned, he has done nothing until someone can actually prove that he has done something. And if she did not come forward early enough, well, I think that can be a topic of discussion. I don't think women should be ashamed of coming forward with these kinds of things, or men, to be fair. They shouldn't be ashamed of coming forward about sexual assault, but 36 years ago, with absolutely no evidence, we just have to assume he's innocent, and that's kind of just how law works here. And if you say, oh, well, that's just the law, it's our opinions also matter. Well, not really. Sorry. The concept of innocent till proven guilty is not one that only applies to law. It is a foundation of the culture as well. And to ignore this and simply say, well, it's convenient for me that he's guilty, so he must be, it's pretty disgusting. A question that remains unresolved because of the supposed investigation, which was such a transparent sham. Oh, okay. Putting such a man in the Supreme Court has, at a stroke, destroyed the court's moral authority for the foreseeable future. Their moral authority. Interesting. Again, I mean, what's the job of the Supreme Court? Is it to make moral judgments? Or is it to interpret the Constitution and tell people what it means? Interesting. But such long-term worries should be secondary concern right now. The more immediate threat comes from what we saw on the Republican side during and after the hearing. Not just contempt for the truth, lol, but also a rush to demonize any and all criticism. In particular, the readiness with which senior Republicans embraced crazy conspiracy theories about the opposition to Kavanaugh is a deeply scary warning about what might happen to America. Not in the long run, but just a few weeks from now. So, you're upset that the Republicans believe in innocent till proven guilty. I see. How horrible of them. About that conspiracy theorizing. Oh, here we go. He's got something. It began in the first moments of Kavanaugh's testimony, when he attributed his problems to a calculated and orchestrated political hit, motivated by people seeking revenge on behalf of the Clintons. This was a completely false, hysterical accusation, and making it should in itself have disqualified Kavanaugh for the court. Really? You don't think this was political at all? Is that what you're telling me? You don't think that they held on to these accusations until 2 weeks before the vote? After having them for more than a month. I think it was like 2 months or something they had these for. Before they actually came forward with them. You don't think that they forced Dr. Ford to publicly testify when she explicitly said she did not want to come forward publicly and wanted to do this in a private hearing? You don't think that completely disregarding her wishes, just so that they could do this at the perfect time, was in any way politically driven? Is that so, Paul? Okay. Sure, buddy. Yeah. People seeking revenge on behalf of the Clintons. Yeah, they're kind of... Maybe that's a little misworded. I just said something like, people who were salty as fuck after they lost the 2016 election. That's what I would have said. And that's just clearly true. The Democratic senators are losing their minds over how upset they are, or have already lost them, over how upset they are after losing the 2016 election. They knew within their heart of hearts, or wherever you want to say, they knew she was going to win. That was a fact. And it was reported as a fact for the entire time. And then to have that taken away from them by someone they despise so much as Trump, just pushed them over that cliff. Now they're just falling and getting crazier and crazier. But Donald Trump quickly made it much worse, attributing protests against Kavanaugh at George Soros and declaring falsely and with no evidence that the protesters were being paid. I don't know if it's false or not. To be fair, I've heard stories that there were protesters being paid. I've heard stories that there weren't protesters being paid. What I know is a fact is that these protesters were definitely being encouraged into incivility by the leftist elite. We saw Maxine Waters and Cory Booker especially do this, and we also saw Hillary Clinton say something as disgusting as, once we've won the House back, then we can be civil again. Clearly just outright stating, we are not being civil now, and we have no intention of being civil again unless you give us exactly what we want. Disgusting. And here's the thing. Major figures in the GOP quickly backed Trump up. Of course they did. Charles Grassley, chairman of the Senate committee that heard Blasey and Kavanaugh, insisted that the protesters were indeed employed by Soros. Senator John Corbin declared, "We will not be bullied by the screams of paid protesters. No, the protesters aren't being paid to protest, let alone by George Soros. But to be a good Republican, you know you have to pretend they are." Again, I don't know if this is true or not. Wouldn't be surprising. I know there have been situations where they were paid in the past, and you might say, oh, that was just like, if they got arrested, then they could pay the fees. Yeah, so they were being given money to do something. That means they're getting paid to do it. What's going on here? At one level, this isn't new. Conspiracy theorizing has been part of American politics from the beginning. Richard Hofstadter published his famous essay, The Paranoid Style in American Politics, back in 1964, and cited examples running back to the 18th century. Segregationists fighting civil rights routinely blamed outside agitators, especially northern Jews, for African American protests. I don't really have any knowledge on this, but whenever somebody brings up Jews, I'm always a little skeptical. But the significance of conspiracy theorizing depends on who does it. When people on the political fringe blame shadowy forces, often as it happens, sinister Jewish financiers, again, whenever Jews are brought up, be skeptical, for their frustrations, you can write it off as delusional. When people who hold most of the Most of the levers to the power do the same thing. Their fantasizing isn't delusional. It's a tool. A way to delegitimize opposition, to create excuses, not just for disregarding, but for punishing anyone who dares criticize their actions. Okay. I don't know. Paul Krugman is, he's going a little emotional here. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I don't really know what to make of this exactly. He's saying people do conspiracy theories. Well, what's the Russia narrative then? Is that a conspiracy theory? Something that has literally no evidence? Actually none? The Pissgate, is that a conspiracy theory, Paul Krugman? Is that a conspiracy theory driven by people who have some amount of power? Is it? I don't know, man. It might be. That's why conspiracy theories have been central to the ideology of so many authoritarian regimes, from Mussolini's Italy to Erdogan's Turkey. It's why the government of Hungary and Poland, former democracies that have become de facto one-party states, love to accuse outsiders in general, and Soros in particular, of stirring up opposition to their rule. Well, to be fair, Soros has done actually some pretty shady shit regarding the refugees. NGOs funded by him have been doing some really terrible things. And to be fair, I mean, all you need to do to be doing a terrible thing is bringing them to Europe from Africa or the Middle East on your ship. A lot of them apparently have even brought ships that just basically can't get anywhere, towed them close enough to Europe so that they have to tow them back to Europe by law. There's a law in many European states, I think it might just be an EU law actually, where if a ship is close enough to Europe, or if the closest, when a wreck is found, they have to bring it to the closest safe port. So if it gets close enough to Europe, it has to be brought to Europe by law. So you'll tow some piece of shit ship out just close enough so that it has to be towed to Europe, call the European Coast Guard to come pick it up, and they have to bring them back to Europe. Pretty fucked up stuff. As far as Hungary and Poland no longer being democracies, they still hold elections, and the thing that the EU is so pissed off at them for, not taking refugees, was actually decided democratically. The people of those countries voted not to take refugees. That is why the EU is mad at them. That is very democratic. In fact, they're probably some of the more democratic nations in the EU, which is pretty hilarious. Not to mention the EU as itself is just a completely undemocratic thing. The people who are ruled by the commissioners of the EU do not have any say in who is elected or appointed to these positions. So how could you possibly think that's a democratic system? But of course we have Paul Krugman here, who knows that saying things that are undemocratic will just tickle that right little part of a leftist brain to get them nice and upset. So we move on. And now senior figures in the Republican Party, which controls all three branches of the federal government. If you had any questions about whether the Supreme Court was a partisan institution, they should be gone now. So what about when it was a partisan institution for the left? Like, he's fine with it being a partisan institution as long as the Democrats have control of it. He doesn't care then. But as soon as the Republicans do, he's going to pull out what little hair he has left. In some attempt to get people to be upset about this. It's pretty laughable. Are sounding just like the white nationalists in Hungary and Poland. Holy shit. The answer, I submit, is the GOP is an authoritarian regime in waiting. This guy's too much. Okay. So, Paul Krugman has clearly figured out that there's a subsection of the American population who just hate conservatives. They hate them so much. And if you say something bad about conservatives like they're authoritarians, well, then you are liked by those people. Paul Krugman has clearly figured this out. Trump himself clearly has these same instincts as the foreign dictators he so openly admires. I mean, again, Trump is someone who basically likes the people who like him. This is one of the reasons I'm not actually a huge fan of Trump, but I see his value and the thing that he needs to do, which is fight a culture war. That's Trump's role in politics. It's not to actually get anything done. Trump's role is to wake people up to the insane shit that Democrats have been doing for some time now. Not so much to be a great politician. He demands that public officials be loyal to him personally. Yeah, not a fan of that. Not to the American people. He threatens political opponents with retribution. Yeah, everyone does that, though. 2 years after the last election, he's still leading chants of lock her up. Well, she is a criminal, so. He attacks the news media as enemies of the people. Well, if they didn't stop, or if they would just stop lying, then he wouldn't have to. This is what I'm talking about. Like, these are not good political moves. Well, they kind of are just because of Trump's role within politics. But like a normal politician, if they were just attacking Clinton and saying, lock her up, probably wouldn't be the greatest move for them. That would alienate a lot of people. But Trump understands that his role is not so much to be the perfect politician. Trump's role is to be a culture warrior. And these are things that are excellent for culture warriors to do. Yeah. Most people, when they look at the evidence against Clinton, think, yeah, she's probably guilty. And even if she's not, she's done some really fucked up stuff to other people. Libya, much. So when he says things like lock her up, that appeals to the thing that they already know, which is that Clinton is a terrible person. And it makes them like Trump, basically. And in the investigations, closing in on Trump's many scandals, oh please, from tax cheating to self-dealing in office to possible collusions with Russia. Yeah, but Paul Krugman is going to accuse other people of conspiracy theorizing. Did you know that Paul Krugman is going to accuse you, Mr. Republican, of being a conspiracy theorist, while saying things like, add in the investigations closing in on Trump's many scandals, from tax cheating to self-dealing in office to possible collusions with Russia. There's no bias here, folks. None at all. All of which give him every incentive to shut down freedom of the press and independence of law enforcement. He's never arrested a single journalist. He's been shitty to journalists, but that's because journalists are shitty to him. Now we should remember, Trump was friends with these people until about 10 years ago, or whenever he started to think about running for office as a Republican. If he'd run as a Democrat and had said the things that they wanted him to say, they'd have loved Trump. They'd have loved Trump, and this Pussygate thing would have never come out. There would have never been anything about him being colluding with Russia. There would have never been all these silly conspiracy theories against Trump because he would have been on their side, and they are as partisan as anyone ever could be. Remember, Paul Krugman is quite clearly somewhat of a radical. Whenever a radical does something, you gotta think, is this a projection? Is Paul Krugman saying that the GOP are conspiracy theorists because he himself has bought into conspiracy theories? He might have, or he might be. Does anyone doubt that Trump will go authoritarian given the chance? Yes. Why would... Very few people actually want to do that. What's Trump done? I mean, does cutting taxes make you an authoritarian? Does that make you an authoritarian? No. Okay. Does stopping people from being forced to buy something make you an authoritarian? No. No, of course not. Giving people more freedom is the opposite of being an authoritarian. So, this is silly. And who's going to stop him? The senators parroting conspiracy theories about Soros-paid protesters? The newly rigged Supreme Court? What we've learned in the past few weeks is that there is no gap between Trump and his party. Nobody will stop in the name of American values. Okay. It's too funny to read these and just understand that this guy supports Democrats. But as I said, the GOP is an authoritarian regime in waiting, not yet one in practice. What's it waiting for? Well, think of what Trump and his party might do if they retain both houses of Congress in the upcoming election. If you aren't terrified of where we might be in the near future, you aren't paying attention. Oh, what's he going to do with it? No answer. No answer at all. What's Trump waiting for? No fucking clue. He just gave us nothing. He needed to wait for those 2 years while he already has control over both houses? Yeah? Okay, Paul. This article is just, it's so debased, it's very comical. I don't know what to say. He's accusing people of being conspiracy theorists while being one himself. The hypocrisy of Paul Krugman knows no bounds. Well, I hope you enjoyed this one. I might go through more Paul Krugman's articles because this was pretty excellent, and it's about a good length for a nice little video like this. So if you enjoyed, please hit that like, hit that sub button. Oh man, self-plug. I feel so dirty. Alright, have a good one.